Hi, boys and girls. This is Grandma Sheila with this week's story. It's called Francisco's Toothache. Well, Francisco, he was known to be the terror of the countryside. He did bad things all the time. When they would bring him to court, the judges would see that it was Francisco and they were afraid, so they wouldn't convict him. And Francisco had another way about him. He oftentimes would do really bad things, and the people would know it had to be Francisco that had done him. But somehow he always got away with it. The whole countryside was afraid of Francisco, and if he told them to do something, they did it. Down that big river in South America came a little launch. A launch is a boat. They use these boats to go up and down the rivers, like in South America and other places. And missionaries oftentimes run those boats. Well, this little launch had the missionary whose name was Pedro and his wife Alicia. Well, they had been down in the lowlands, and the people there had come out to listen to Pedro preach, and they had come to the launch for Alicia, who was a nurse, to take care of whatever ailed them. But when they got here, it was a beautiful place. There were pretty jungle trees all along, and the river was nice and calm. Oh yes, it had crocodiles and stuff in it. But Pedro, he got busy because he was going to preach to these people. And he had sent word out to the little villages there along the river that he was going to have pictures to show to the children. And Alicia was going to tell them stories. Now, what kid in whatever country can resist a good story? They also said, come up our gangplank, and we will help make you better. And we will tell you all about the God of heaven that can cure all diseases. Pedro, he got all his equipment ready. Pedro, he would play music. He had a projector. Do you know what a projector is? A projector is a small machine, and I'll show you a picture, but it's a machine that you can put slides. Now, I bet you don't know what slides are, but slides were little square pictures that the pictures had been put on these clear little squares, and they had little plastic frames in the center of them, and the picture would sit right there. Well, they were only about this square, but you pushed them in the back of the projector, and there was a light that shone out in the front, and the light would shine through the picture, and it would make it great big. He would shine that onto a screen so the people could see all the pictures while he told the stories of Jesus. Well, he also had a small record player. Well, I know we don't use record players anymore, but you would take those round black records, and they had little bitty grooves in them. And in those days, people could sing and they would put all the music on this round record. And so he got that all ready, and they had a little organ that his wife played. Well, the first night came, but the odd thing was, occasionally the children would come and peek to see what he was doing, and he would tell them, "Tell your parents to come. Tell them to come tonight and hear all the stories about Jesus. And they can come here and my wife, the nurse, will help make them well." Well, the first night, nobody had come. That missionary and his wife had eaten their supper, and in every other place they'd stopped, they hardly got to eat their food at all because there were so many people coming and going. But tonight there was nobody. Not one person appeared to be coming. Well, the missionary, he went out, he had his projector ready and his screen, he had his record player ready to go, and the organ was out there for his wife to play. But there weren't any people. And he looked out to that jungle. It was all big tropical trees. And as that missionary looked, he thought he saw, maybe it was people going behind those palm trees. And then he thought he could see movement going the other way. He thought, well, maybe these people are shyer and they're afraid to come out. But he thought that was odd. Then he went to his wife and he said, "Alicia, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the record player on. I'll turn it all the way up so it blares music out. Nice hymns and music for their children and things that they might enjoy, and then maybe they'll come." So he rushed out. And so he put a long extension cord and he put his record player out there along that beach, and he turned it all the way up, and music was going everywhere out into that jungle. Everybody could hear it. He knew that it would carry to a lot of those villages. But still nobody came. Finally, he went back in the boat because there was no people for his wife to give medicine to and to do dressings and stuff on, so she was in there writing letters. He said, "Alicia, I have an idea. Come out. We're going to do our meeting just as if all the people were here. And maybe they'll start hearing something, and then they'll come out. Maybe they'll come out of the jungle then." So Alicia came out, and he said, "Now, you play the organ, and I will sing as loud as I can. You can sing with me, too. Maybe the singing and the music will make the people come." So Alicia started to play, and the missionary started to sing, but nobody came. Have you ever felt like, though, that somebody was watching you? Well, the missionary, he looked out at that green jungle out there, and he thought, "I think there's eyes out there." But he couldn't see them, but he felt like people were watching him. So he sang even louder. And then he got down, he knelt in the sand of that beach, and he prayed to God just as if those people were there. Then he turned on his projector and he started showing those beautiful pictures. And then he started to preach. His wife told a story. And then the missionary continued to preach till his sermon was all done. And he called out to the people, "Come tomorrow night again. I'll be here. And come tomorrow so that the nurse can help you get well." But there was no sound from that jungle. Nothing at all. It was dark then. So they got up and went back into their boat. And Alicia said, "This is odd. Do you suppose maybe these aren't friendly villagers? Oh, maybe. Maybe these are cruel, bad people. Maybe these are like those people that we read about who put poisonous arrows and shot them at the missionaries. Or maybe like those people that poisoned the missionaries' water." But somehow, I don't think that's the case. I think they're afraid for some reason. So the next night, all that day, the second day, nobody came to see the nurse. Nobody came to hear the music and see the beautiful pictures or hear the sermon. By the fourth day, still nobody had come. Something was wrong. But they had their meeting anyway. The morning, really early of the fifth day, the missionary was sound asleep. Matter of fact, he was snoring. And he heard something. He looked out the doorway. He couldn't see anybody out there. Now, it wasn't very light yet, but he thought he better get up and look. So he pulled on his pants and his shirt, and he went outside. And like I say, the sun hadn't come up yet. And then he heard it again. Oh, oh. And the missionary, somebody's sick or hurt or something. So he ran out on the deck of the boat, and he put down his gangplank, and he rushed down it. And there he saw a man. And the man was all kneeling down, and he had his hand up to the side of his face. "Oh, oh," he said. And Pedro, the missionary, he ran down to him and he said, "Compadre, what can I do for you?" And he said, "It's my tooth. Oh, it hurts so bad. Can you pull my tooth? I heard last night you telling people that if they were to come, that you were a doctor and you would take care of them." Pedro, he wasn't a doctor. And he told this man, he said, "I'm not a doctor, but my wife is a nurse, and we'll try to do everything we can for you." And so he motioned for that man to follow him. And he set out a chair there on the deck. And he ran in. His wife was still in bed. He said, get up. We have a patient, a man who needs his tooth pulled." And she went, "Oh, I've never pulled a tooth. I don't know how." But she had seen somebody pull a tooth. Pedro said, "Where are those forceps?" She said, well, I've never used them. They were just here in the launch when we bought it. He said, well, find them. She said, okay, but I think you should do it. And she said, I'll get some anesthetic to put into his gums so it doesn't hurt so bad while you do it. So she got dressed real quick and she went and she found those forceps, and they obviously were for a dentist. But she didn't know which one to use. So she came out, and the missionary was all businesslike, and he said, tell me your name. And the man looked down and he kind of shrank back. He said, Francisco. I'm sure you've heard of all the bad things I've done. And the missionary said, how would I have heard? Nobody has even come here to get acquainted. But we're going to see what we can do for your tooth. My wife is going to put some medicine down into your gum so it will numb it so you don't have as much pain. Well, the wife drew up that medicine into the syringe. And Pedro said, now, Francisco, open your mouth big. And he went, ah. Well, the missionary's wife, she took that needle and she took a piece of gauze and she swabbed on that. And then she very carefully, where he said that tooth that hurt was, she put that medicine out of that syringe. And then Pedro said, we're going to wait a little bit so it doesn't hurt so bad. And after that little bit of waiting, Alicia said, oh, you please do it, honey. You do it. So the husband, he picked up the forceps and he said, open your mouth again, which Francisco did. And the missionary, he looked in there, and with those forceps, he clamped around that sore tooth. And his wife said, just pull hard. So he clamped that down, and he started pulling. It's not an easy thing to pull a tooth out. And he pulled, and he pulled, and he pulled. And it started to move. That tooth did. And he thought, I've almost got it. And then he gave one really hard pull. And the forceps came off the tooth. And Francisco said, if you're worried about it hurting me, I'm okay. Just get it out of there. So Pedro, he put that back on the tooth. And he pulled with all of his might. And out of Francisco's mouth flew that tooth. Francisco said, you did it, you did it. Well, of course it was bleeding in there. And Alicia, she put gauze in there. Well, Francisco, he had told them, remember when he first came, he told the missionary about all the bad things he had done. And I've figured out a way to do so many things. And, sir, the reason nobody's come was because I threatened them. I told them not to come. And now I'm sorry. Now that you fixed my tooth, I'll send word to everybody to come and hear you that you're a good guy. Well, Francisco, for once in his life, kept his word. And from village to village, the word was spread that the launch was a really good place to go if you were sick, and that the people should come and hear what Pedro had to say. And that night, number 5, it was standing room only out on that beach. When Pedro started teaching everybody, the children and the people, how to sing the Jesus songs, as they called it, they all tried to sing. When he put the music on the record, they all oohed and awed because they'd never seen a record player before, and there was music coming out of that box. What was in that box that made music? Well, when he started to preach about Jesus, he put his pictures up from that projector up on the screen, and they all went, "Oh." I don't think most of them had ever seen a picture before. When Alicia told the stories, all the children listened with rapt attention. They were so excited. Well, that night, once again, Pedro, he made an announcement. Come to the launch tomorrow. We'll try to fix whatever's making you sick. Among the people that came to listen was Francisco. I don't know if anybody sat on the sand beside him because they were still afraid of him. As those meetings went on night after night, everybody listened intently. And do you know, boys and girls, the night that Pedro got up and he asked if anybody wanted to give their heart to Jesus? Do you know who the very first person was that came rushing up? It was Francisco. And he looked at Pedro, and he looked at all those villagers whose eyes were big now. Francisco? And Francisco said, I'm not going to be the terror of the country anymore. I'm going to be a Jesus man. And do you know, he was baptized in that river, and never again, because Jesus had changed his heart, did Francisco ever commit one crime or scare or threaten any of the people or do any of the bad things that he had ever done. Francisco was a changed man once Jesus came to live in his heart. You know, boys and girls, if you ask Jesus to come into your heart, he'll make you a better boy and girl, and you will be happy like Francisco was when he stopped doing all those bad things because Jesus was living in his heart. Thank you, boys and girls. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.